everyone. Good afternoon. As you've heard, my name's Laura Alcott. I am an Associate Director for HSE Recruitment and our parent company, Executive Network Group. Long story short, we recruit health and safety people. That's what we do. We've been doing that for a very, very long time. So thank you for joining me today. We're going to do a session where we're just going to talk a little bit about building your career. So we've got some insights from the years of doing this on various different things that hopefully are going to help you if you're starting out in your career or if you're further along and looking to kind of progress. So there we go. So this is what we are going to cover today in this session. As you've already heard, it would be great if we get some interaction. So please, if you have questions that you're thinking of as we're going through this stuff, please do put them in the chat. We're going to have time to go through them at the end. I love hearing your questions and chatting to you guys. So yeah, please do get involved. But today what I thought we would cover is a little bit on the employment trends that we've been seeing this year and what we're expecting to see next year. Because I think if you are, looking to progress your career, it's really good to know what those trends are. It's good to have some data on what employers are looking for, how you stand out, that sort of thing. So we'll do a little bit on the trends that we've seen. We're going to go over as well some of the issues that employers have at the moment and how you can use that to your advantage. So obviously doing what we do, we spend a lot of time talking to companies that are looking to recruit people or looking to promote people or just looking for great health and safety talent. And we know what the problems are that they're facing. So we're going to give you that information so you know how to use that to your advantage and help you get really good jobs, really good promotions, that sort of thing. We're going to do a little bit on interview techniques. So just to give you, again, some insight into what employers are looking for when you have that interview, what's going to make you stand out, what's going to make sure you really come across as best as you possibly can. And then we're going to do a little bit on just general tips for career progression. So that'll be things like, progressing in your current role, standing out, getting pay rises, all the important stuff. So a whistle-stop tour through this today. But yeah, please do ask questions as we're going along. I'd love to chat to you all in a bit more detail at the end. So firstly, who am I? Why am I here talking to you about this today? So as I mentioned, I am a director for HSE Recruitment. We're health and safety recruitment specialists. I've been doing this for 15 years now. I know I don't look old enough, but yeah, 15 years, doing it for a long time. And the company itself has been going for 23 years. So, we're pretty well established in the health and safety industry. We work all across the world. A lot of people sometimes think we're just UK based, but we work globally. So we've got an office in Birmingham, which is our head office. We've got a satellite office in London, a satellite office in the Netherlands, covering the EMEA region. And then we work remotely in all sorts of weird and wonderful places. So yeah, work all over the world. We do permanent and contract. So if you're, particularly looking at contract roles, that's something that we can help you with as well. So just, if you've got specific questions around that, IR35, anything like that, feel free to ask that. And I like to try and be as embedded in the safety industry as possible because I don't want to just be a recruitment expert. I want to understand what you guys do. And obviously I'm not a safety professional. I'm never gonna be as good as you guys, but I want to really understand what it is you do so that I can help you and I can help you with this progression and things like that. So to that end, I sit on the IOSH nominations committee, which is a volunteer position that recruits all of the top positions for IOSH. So, chair of the board and vice president and president-elect and all of that sort of stuff. I work really closely with RRSM, have done for a number of years. So I sit on their editorial panel for the membership magazine, which is brilliant, absolutely fantastic magazine. I'm sure you all agree. And I have a couple of specialist subjects that I like to talk about. That's personal branding, diversity, imposter syndrome, and of course, everything recruitment. So you may have heard me talk on a couple of these different topics previously. I've done most of these for RRSM before, so you can definitely go and have a look in their archives and have a look and find some videos or webinars on some of those topics if you're interested as well. So first things first, trends. So what have we been seeing this year what do we expect to see next year? Because this, I think, is really, really important. You know, the safety market changes a lot, and it can be very, very competitive. So it's good to know what employers are looking for. What are the things that are really going to jump out at them? And the thing that we've definitely found at manager level and above, so the more senior end of the market, is there is a huge focus on soft skills, or some people call them human skills, over the qualifications at the moment. That's really, really important to 99% of the clients that we work with. So what I mean by those sort of soft skills, those human skills, it's things like leadership, engagement, business continuity, culture change, psychological safety, all that stuff that shows you know more than kind of just the basics of the day-to-day. And these are really, really important for you to get across at interview. And that's where a lot of people will fall down. You know, a lot of people think, okay, I've got the qualifications they're looking for. I've got the experience that they're looking for, in terms of, I've done 5 years in food and drink or whatever it is, but they fall down this soft skills section. So it's really, really important that these soft skills are things that we are working on and developing all the time, and then making sure we tell people about them. And that's not just for, new jobs, that's for your current role as well. If you're looking to progress at the moment into those sort of managerial positions within your own company, these are the sort of skills that are going to make you stand out and are going to help you to do that. At the more junior end of the market, so entry-level advisors, things like that, there's more of a focus on experience. You'll notice again, it's not really qualifications that's the important bit, and that doesn't mean qualifications are not important, because they are, but qualifications are kind of the minimum expectation from employers. They expect you, at a junior level to have an NEBOSH certificate. They expect you at a senior level to have a diploma or a degree or something like that. They're looking for the extra. That's what they're looking for, to really see who's standing out. And that experience piece is huge at a junior level. And can be quite tough. So I get that. People that are just starting out in industry, getting that first bit of experience is really, really difficult. But I've got some ideas on how you can kind of emphasize what you have done and things like that. So, for example, if you're starting out and you're applying for safety roles, you just need to emphasize anything that you've done that is particularly relevant to health and safety. So have you been working as a safety rep, for example? Have you been getting involved? Can you shadow someone within your work, so you can put on your CV that you've done that, you've been shadowing, you've been learning, anything like that can kind of emphasize that experience. An example that I use is actually my niece was moving over from South Africa. She was looking for a job over here. She was a lab manager in South Africa and wanted to get into health and safety. So she did her NEBOSH certificate and was looking for a role, but was struggling because people were saying, look, you don't have any experience. So what she did is she made sure she reframed her CV in a way that demonstrated all the safety stuff she'd actually been doing as part of her role as a lab manager. So even though she wasn't a safety professional, she'd been doing things like risk assessments and safe systems of work and things like that. So by emphasizing that, she got a great job and is now working in the pharmaceutical industry as a health and safety advisor. So that's the kind of thing that we mean when we're talking about experience, is making sure you emphasize anything you can to demonstrate that you've got that understanding outside of the qualification, outside of the piece of paper. We're also seeing an increased focus on safety systems. So people that have got really good understanding of safety systems, the implementation of them, the development of them, auditing of them, they're going to be quite high in demand, I think, going into 2026. And this is interesting because systems have always been important in health and safety, but since sort of the COVID years, employers were really focusing more on the cultural piece and things like that. And we are seeing a slight trend now back towards compliance and just making sure they've got that basic stuff right. So that comes hand in hand with getting the systems right. So anyone that is already got that systems experience, I think this will be a really good time for you if you're looking for roles or looking for promotions. But it's a good area for people to upskill themselves in, go and do those sort of ISO auditing courses and things like that, because it's definitely something that people are really, really interested in and looking for at the moment. And there's also, of course, an increased focus on environmental and sustainability. And that goes for globally, despite the fact that there's stuff going on all over the world, and that, you know, countries that maybe aren't focusing on it as much. Within health and safety, it's still a really big focus, you know, wherever you're working. So that's a really, really key area that I think people can be either upskilling themselves on or diversifying into. You know, if you are maybe a health and safety professional and you've got an interest in environmental, this is a great time to move yourself across and become environmental advisor, environmental manager, sustainability, CSR, all that stuff is only getting bigger. To the extent that, you know, all of us within the team, we've always recruited health, safety and environmental, but we've actually hired 2 people who literally just do environmental and sustainability roles, because that's how popular it is at the moment and how big it's going to be going into 2026. So that's a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we've seen going on. I have got a white paper that I've written recently that might be of interest to some of you. This was in conjunction with IILSC, and this white paper was all about the future safety leader. So it's all about trends and what to expect and what we think a safety leader of the future is going to look like. And some of the stuff that came up in there is really, really interesting. It was myself and Bertrand, who's the COO of IILSC. So go away and have a look at that. But some of the things we were talking about in there are things like, you know, companies are really looking for those influential culture builders at the senior level. So again, that's that soft skills, that's that human skills part, where they're looking for people who can engage, who know how to you know, manage key stakeholders, who know how to influence people. That's really, really key at that senior end of the market. We also talked about the increased focus on mental health and well-being. That's still huge. You know, that became a really, really big thing. Again, after COVID, we saw lots and lots of companies starting to look at that within their safety function, and that's not going anywhere. Definitely still a really, really big part of it. We're seeing more roles now come in that are health, safety and well-being, as opposed to just sort of health and safety. So again, a really good area that you could be, you know, upskilling yourself on or developing, you know, have a look into some training, some development around that, if that's something you're interested in. And that could be a really, really good thing to help you kind of progress. And then one of the final things we talked about, I mean, there's lots more in there, but one of the other things we talked about in there was the concept of true leadership over safety leadership. So again, so this is people who can really understand the values and the drive of a company and integrate it into what they do as a safety professional. So it becomes less about, you know, leading safety and more about leading the business. So it's all interconnected. So that's a really, really interesting one again. And again, probably very much leaning on the soft skills side of it. So you'll see there's a trend there at the senior end of the market for that soft skills stuff, as we discussed. But yeah, go away and have a read of this, and feel free again to ask me any questions. You know, you can message me afterwards if you have any questions after reading this, but lots of interesting stuff in there about trends for the future. So one of the things that we get asked all the time by people who want to progress their career by either getting promoted or getting a new job is, how do they make themselves stand out? Because it's really competitive out there. There's loads of people looking for jobs. There's a lot of good safety people in the marketplace. So how do you stand out from the crowd? So what I thought I'd do is tell you some of the big problems that clients are facing when they're looking for safety people. And then I'm going to tell you how you get around that and use it to your advantage. So the first thing that that clients are really finding when they're sort of looking directly for people for the safety team is that the quality of the ad response they're getting probably isn't very good. Now, that doesn't mean that they're getting ad response from people who aren't safety professionals. They are getting safety people apply, but the CVs, the quality isn't there. The quality of those CVs isn't telling them what they need to know. It's not giving them the information that would make them feel confident that people could do the job. And this has been a problem for a couple of years now. But the good side to this is, if you have a very, very well-written and relevant CV, you are going to stand out. And there's some really simple ways of doing this. So what we always recommend is that you have your CV, you know, your standard document, but that is sort of a basis template. And for every role that you apply for, or every promotion that you go for, you then tailor that CV to that particular opportunity. This sounds like a lot of work. and it is. It's, you know, I get it. It's a lot to do this for every application if you're applying for loads of different things. But that's what makes you stand out, because the reason CV quality is quite poor for ad response is people aren't doing this because they're sending their CV to, you know, 100 different jobs at once, and it's the same CV, and it's not making it relevant. So when you tailor your CV, what we recommend you do is take a look at the job description that the company has put out there, and try and make your CV match up to it as much as possible without lying. We don't want you to put stuff on the CV that isn't true. But for example, I was once looking for someone for a client who wanted to do a huge project on ergonomics. That was their big thing that they were pushing. Ergonomics, DSC, that was a really big thing for them. And I had sort of over 400 people apply in the first couple of days, all of whom probably could have done the job. If I'd spoken to them and if I'd had time to speak to 400 people, I probably would have realized most of them could do the job. But I would say 95% of those people didn't have the words ergonomics or DSE in their CVs at all. So, you know, because people like us, recruiters, internal talent acquisition, HR people, they're on a time crunch. They haven't got hours and hours and hours to call 400 people to find out if you've got the relevant experience. They will just look to see if it's in the CV or not. And if it's not, they will move on to the next candidate. So you could very easily be cutting yourself out of opportunities that you absolutely could do just because the wording's not right. So yeah, have a look at that job description. If they are talking loads about they want someone who's engaging and influential, make sure you're talking about ways that you've been engaging and influential. If they're talking about someone to come in and implement an ISO system, make sure you talk about the times that you have implemented an ISO system. Try and get the wording to match as much as you possibly can, and that is instantly going to make you stand out. The sad truth of it is, you know, if you are applying to a role directly with a company, their HR director or their internal talent person is probably looking after 300 or so different vacancies at any one time. So they don't have time to search. You've got to make sure this stuff hits them in the face when they open your CV. So if you do that, tailor your CV for every single role that you provide that you apply for. And same if you're going for promotions, make sure you are tailoring that CV so it says you can do what the role needs you to do. You're instantly going to have a huge leg up on the competition. The other side of it as well at the moment is that the ad response itself is quite low. So not only are the CVs that they're getting through probably not right for them, they're not getting very many of them. You know, people aren't necessarily applying and moving around as much as they would have been a couple of years ago. Very common. We see this all the time when the cost of living increases, when, you know, when there's potential recessions and things like that. This always happens. People want to stay put. They feel comfortable where they are, so they don't apply for as much. So what that means is that a lot of companies now are using a recruitment agency or a headhunter like ourselves to find people for them, because they're not getting very many ad responses, and the ones they are getting aren't relevant. So what you need to do is make sure you're very easy to headhunt, that you're easy to find, so that people can approach you about things. So, you know, what you want to be doing is making sure that you're networking, that your brand is really, really strong on LinkedIn, that you're talking about things that you're passionate about on there. So, you know, are you really passionate about culture change? Have you just taken your company through a huge culture change program? Talk about it on LinkedIn, you know, write some blogs, engage with people, share stories, share information. And that's going to make your profile really, really obvious and really easy for headhunters to find. And that goes for companies that aren't using an agency as well. A lot of them now have internal talent teams, and those internal talent teams, they will be headhunting. That's what they're doing. They're trying to find you. So make yourself easy to find. So if you haven't got a LinkedIn, you need a LinkedIn so people can find you. You know, if you are actively looking, get your CV on the job boards, so again, people can find you, and start engaging and kind of making a name for yourself. Another issue, we're finding that salary expectations are really misaligned at the moment, and that's from the client side. So salaries, again, after COVID, weirdly, it has changed a lot in the safety market. Salaries for health and safety went crazy. And we usually in health and safety, it's a good industry. We usually see that pay increases do track at least at the inflation rate, if not slightly above it most years. It's a decent industry for that sort of thing. But after COVID, the salaries were going up 20% every year for a couple of years. So they've skyrocketed. And the issue with that, for example, is if you've got a company that they've got a health and safety manager who's worked there for 10 years, they're paying them a salary that 10 years ago would have been correct. That safety manager leaves, they're trying to recruit, and they haven't realized that salaries have changed this much, and they're trying to recruit at the old salaries, and that's not what people get paid anymore. So this is a really, really big problem. But again, it can be a huge advantage for you if you are looking at the moment, because this is a great time where companies will hire for potential. They will look at people who can develop. They will look at people who could be fantastic and could be the finished article in a year or so. So if you are an advisor wanting to get into a manager role, this is a perfect time to do it. If you're a manager looking to get into a head of role, this is a great time to do it, because a lot of companies have realized the salary expectations are kind of misaligned. They're not going to get a like for like. So they'll take someone who's a step down, that can train, can develop into the role. So that's a really, really good, a good thing, I think, and something that you can use to your advantage. And then another thing is as well is clients, we get this feedback all the time when they've been recruiting themselves, they've been recruiting directly, is that, yeah, they didn't have many applications. The ones they did have, the quality wasn't very good. They maybe got 1 or 2 interviews off their own advert. And then those people came to interview and were completely unprepared for the interview. And that is such a simple thing to fix, but it happens all the time. And the problem is, because usually if someone's actively looking, they've possibly got a couple of options on the go. They're interviewing for 2 or 3 roles at any one time. So they're not necessarily, again, prepared for this specific opportunity. So we will get clients who will say, for example, oh, look, we interviewed someone, they looked great on paper, they came in and they were pretty good, they could answer most of the competency questions, but they were completely unprepared in that they didn't know anything about us as a company. They didn't know why they wanted to work for us. It was clear they just wanted a job. It didn't matter if it was us or not. And that's not what clients are looking for, what companies are looking for. They want people that are passionate and want to work for them. So this is a great way that you can stand out again when you get to that interview stage. Make sure you're researching the company. Why do you want to work for them? Not why do you want a new role? What is it about them that attracts you? So is it their values? Is it the reviews from current staff that say what a wonderful place it is to work? Is it the upcoming projects they've got that look really, really exciting? So, for example, do you know that they've got a huge construction project starting next year to build a new factory or to build some new lines? Talk about that, why that excites you. All that sort of stuff, again, is just going to make you really, really stand out and look different to the competition. And then just a little bit more here on some interview technique stuff. So if anyone wants this full article that I've written, then do let me know and I can send this across to you. But this is something called the STAR method. The STAR method, a lot of people do know about, and yet don't seem to use correctly. And again, just by using this method, you are going to stand out. It's going to make a huge difference to you in interviews. And if I think of my experience interviewing, for example, for Irish Nominations Committee, and we interview, like I said, council positions and VPs and all this sort of stuff, we always tell people to use the STAR method, and so many times they just don't. So if you do this will make a huge, huge impact. So the STAR method basically is an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, result. And it's a way of telling stories. So when you go to an interview, it'll be typically a competency interview. So they will ask you to give them an example of a time when. So again, if you had a company, for example, that is looking for someone to come in and implement and develop their safety management system, one of the questions they probably are going to ask you in the interview is, can you give us an example of a time where you've implemented and developed a management system? And then what people tend to do is they just start talking and they waffle on and they tell the story, but they don't get the information across that the client needs to hear. So what you need to think about is the situation. So setting the scene. So this was an example of when I worked at X company. They, hadn't had a safety system before. They brought me in specifically to develop this system and to get it accredited within a certain period of time. Task is then, what were you responsible for? So yeah, it was my responsibility to lead that whole project. I had to set up all of the processes, the safe systems of work. I had to do the auditing for the accreditation process, whatever it is. Talk about what you specifically were responsible for. That's where people fall down a lot, is they'll talk about an example and they'll say we, not I. So, oh, we did this, we did that. No, what did you do? Specifically, what did you do that you were responsible for? So that's your action bit as well. What did you do? So, okay, so because that's what my responsibilities were, this is how I did it. I went and did X, Y, Z, whatever it is, you tell them how you did it. And then result, what happened? So, and we ended up with a fantastic safety system and we got accredited within X amount of years. Whatever it is, give them a result. It's fine if it's a bad result. That's not a problem. But if it's a bad result, what did you learn from it? So, okay, we maybe didn't get the accreditation the first time around, but this is what I learned and this is how I would do things differently next time. So again, just using this STAR method as an interview technique is going to make you really, really stand out from the competition, because most people, even if they do know it, don't use it or don't use it properly. But yeah, if anyone wants this article, which has got, it's quite a long version of this, then do let me know and I can send it over to you. So then the final bit I wanted to talk about is just some tips for career progression, because this is something that we talk about all the time with candidates. People always want to know, how do I get that next step? How do I get that promotion? Where should I be going? What's the future look like for me as a safety professional? So I wanted to give you just a couple of tips on that side of things. Firstly being, make sure you have a plan. So sit down, take some time to really, really think this through and think, okay, this is where I am right now. Where do I want to be in 12 months' time? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? Where do I want to be in 10 years' time? And then everything you do should be towards those goals. So, for example, using myself as an example, when I joined HSE Recruitment, I was a trainee. I had no experience. They trained me, they developed me. And every year I used to sit down with my then director and talk about, okay, where do I want to be in the next 12 months? Where do I want to be in the next 5 years? Where do I want to be in the next 10 years? And we would start by looking at the next 12 months. Okay, well, in 12 months, I want to be promoted to the next level. Okay, this is how we're going to get there. And then I knew what the expectations were. I knew what I had to do. I knew what I had to do personally for development. I knew what skills I had to brush up on. I knew what qualifications I maybe needed to do. And everything I did was in pursuit of that 12-month, 5-year, 10-year goal. I knew when I joined the company that in 10 years, I wanted to be a director, and I became a director at 10 years. So if you have a very, very good plan, I'm not saying it always works, but it's absolutely going to help you know where you're going, because that's a big thing that a lot of people that we talk to don't know. They don't know what they want the next step to be. And it then is going to make it very difficult for you to know what to focus on. Where do I develop myself? What do I apply for? So yeah, have a really, really good plan. Talk to your boss. Everyone's terrified of this one, but bosses are just people like you and I. So make sure you have that conversation with them. It doesn't need to be controversial. It doesn't need to be butting heads, but it needs to be, look, I've been doing some career planning, and in 5 years' time, I'd really like to be a manager. Can you give me some progression? Can you give me some ideas on how I can potentially get there? Ask for their advice, ask for their support, because you need to know whether that is an opportunity for you there. Because if it's not, if they say, look, we can get you to a manager role, but it's probably not going to be for 10 years, that's fine. But you need to know that, because then you can look at other opportunities. People get scared of doing this because they think, oh, my boss is going to think that I'm going to leave. But they're very pragmatic. It doesn't have to be a conversation of, and if I'm not a manager in 5 years, I'm going to leave. It's just, this is something that I've been thinking about. I think that's the way I'd like my career to go. Do you have any advice? Is there anything you can do to support me? They don't need to have that realization of, oh, and if you don't, then I'm going to go. But it just makes sense to have those conversations. And then once you've had those conversations, you've got your plan, then you can look at your development and training. So that means general qualifications. So, as you are climbing up the ladder, traditionally we find that once people get to manager or above, they are diploma or equivalent qualified. So you can start planning that. And okay, when am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? Which provider, which route, degree, diploma, whatever it is, you can start planning that sort of stuff. But you could also look at maybe some niche areas of specialism. Because it could be that you're thinking about what's important to you. You think, in 5 years' time, yeah, I'd like to be a manager, but actually I'd like to do more with mental health. That's something I think that I'm really, really passionate about. And I'd like to do more with that. So again, you can start looking at that development and that training. And again, when you're talking to your boss, usually they will help you with this. Most employers want to help you and they want to develop you and they want to give you that support. So have that conversation and say, okay, is there any training internally we can do? Is there any training externally I can go on? Is there anything you can do to help me with that? Knowing your worth is really, really important. As we said, there is some salary issues with them being misaligned out there in the industry. So knowing what you should be paid is super, super important. So we actually do remuneration reports. I'll show you a little video. So yeah, we do these remuneration reports every single year. So 2025 one came out in January. We're currently collating all the data for the 2026 one. Again, if you want copies of this, reach out to me, let me know, and I can send copies of the 2025 out and 2026 when it's released. But as you saw in the video, those remuneration reports are going to give you so much data and so much knowledge, because you're going to know, okay, people with my sort of level of experience in my industry in this area of the country get paid this. And that will give you a good indication is, okay, am I being undervalued where I currently am? Should I be asking for pay rises? Should I be looking for a new role? It also goes into all the diversity stats there as well, which is really, really interesting. It goes through all the benefits and stuff. So there's just loads and loads of info in there. And I think that's really important. The more you know, the more educated you are on what you should be paid, the better. I never ever trust companies that don't tell you what salaries are, that won't let you talk about salaries. It should be really clear and open and honest. So yeah, have a look at those remuneration reports, know what your value is. And if you're not being paid enough, again, talk to your boss. You can take that data and you can say, look, the industry average is X and I'm 2, 3, 4 grand under that. Is there any possibility of pay rises? Is there any possibility of getting there within 12 months? Or, you can have those conversations. The first thing we tend to ask people when they apply for roles through us is, have you had a conversation with your boss? Are you sure you want to leave? Is there anything they can do internally to help you? Because oftentimes, there is. Oftentimes you can have that discussion and it may not be, yes, we'll give you a pay rise right now, but it may be, yeah, okay, well, actually, we'll work towards that over the next 12 months or something like that. Put yourself out there, apply for things and say yes to opportunities is a really, really big one. So I talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and I'm fairly certain I've done this for RSM, so you should be able to look through the archives and find me talking about this. But there's a really interesting stat that came out from a Hewlett-Packard report a couple of years ago that showed the difference between men and women in applying for roles. So it's something like, I may not have these statistics exactly right off the top of my head, but it's something like men apply for roles when they hit sort of 60% of the criteria, but women will only apply for roles when they hit 100% of the criteria, which is a really, really interesting stat and something that we've definitely anecdotally seen is true. And I always say, what is the worst thing that could happen if you ask for a promotion or apply for a new role? the worst thing that could happen is you don't get the job, you don't get the promotion. You already didn't have the job. So nothing has changed. But what you might have learned along the way is, if you're applying for an external job, you might have gained some interview experience, or if you're applying for a promotion, you may get some development feedback that's really, really useful for you. So there's no downside to this. So throw yourself out there, apply for things, say yes to opportunities. If your boss asks you about, look, do you fancy maybe training on this? Do you fancy upskilling yourself on this area? Say yes to things and grab those opportunities. I'm a big believer in mentoring. Again, I believe RRSM have their own mentoring schemes. So reach out and have a look at the mentoring schemes, because these are really great for career progression. If you've got a mentor that you can talk to that has been there before you and can give you that advice, it's worth its weight in gold. So absolutely look at the mentoring side. And going along with that is the networking side. Get out there, get to events. If RRSM have got seminars or things on, get along to them, network, talk to people, because that's how you find out about opportunities. Good people know good people. So again, one of the first things we'll do if a client is looking for someone is I might call someone that I've known for 10 years and say, do you know anyone good for this? And they'll recommend people to me. They'll give me names. So the more people you know, the more you network, the better. It really is a people industry, health and safety. So yeah, make sure you're putting yourself out there in that respect, and work on the personal brand. We talked about it at the start of the presentation about making sure people can find you so they can headhunt you. And that is all about that personal brand development. That is making sure that you're standing out on LinkedIn. Again, I've definitely spoken about this for RRSM. So hopefully you can go back in the archives and find that video somewhere where I'm talking about it. Or if you've got questions, then drop some questions in. But that personal brand thing is huge. Making yourself stand out and making yourself findable by headhunters is absolutely massive. LinkedIn has a lot of stuff that goes into it with the algorithms and things like that, but basically LinkedIn will penalize people that don't use it the way they want it to be used. So if your profile isn't filled out fully, if you're not engaging with people, if you're not posting and sharing things, LinkedIn will put your name at the bottom of a search. So if I go onto LinkedIn and I search for health and safety managers in Birmingham with food manufacturing experience, you'll be on that list, but you might be on page 7 of that list instead of page 1 of that list. Whereas if you've got that really strong brand and you're engaging and your profile's filled out properly and you're talking to people and you're sharing your experiences, you'll be number 1 on page 1. So you'll be very, very easy to find for these really good opportunities. So yeah, definitely have a little look through the RRSM archives and see if you can dig that stuff out. Or again, yeah, ask me any questions. Which very nicely takes us to the end and the question and answer portion. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has got any questions. If not, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there 24 hours a day. I'm always happy to chat to people. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Laura. I just wanted to sort of echo what Laura said about the previous webinars, that Laura's done a few for us, bless her. So yeah, if anyone is interested in watching any of those, as a member, you can go back onto our member resource hub and access all of those. So please do if you are interested. And if you can't find one or, a particular topic that you're looking for, please do reach out to myself at training@rrsm.org, and I'd be more than happy to try and help you find what you're looking for. And again, on the mentoring side of things, Laura, it's spot on. Yeah, we have a mentoring scheme. So if that's something you are interested in, again, get in touch with me or via the website. You can sign yourself up as a member and access lots of different you can become a mentor, you can become a mentee, you can do peer-to-peer mentoring. There's lots of different options, which is really, really nice.
I think becoming a mentor is just as good, sometimes as being mentored, because you're sharing your experience, but you will learn. You will learn
definitely
stuff, So absolutely get involved with the mentoring.
Yes, you'll learn either way. Okay, so kicking off the questions, the first one is it still possible to progress without access to formal qualifications? So perhaps if your company doesn't have the budget for it, or you're, personally, you don't have the budget.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that's one of the trends. Like we said, we've seen the senior end of the market, they're really focusing on soft skills. Junior end of the market, they're really focusing on experience. So although qualifications are still important, there is the possibility to progress without those. There will always still be certain clients that are just very strict on it. So you will get clients that will say all of our managers have to be diploma because all of our advisors are certificate. So that will still happen, but absolutely, it's not the be all and end all for everything. We find in certain industries it's more common. So for example, in the events, leisure, retail space, we find it's more common for them to focus on experience over qualifications, and you can progress a lot easier there without having all the bells and whistles. But yeah, if you're focusing on what you've actually done, your experience, and you're focusing on the soft skills and human skills, yeah, you can absolutely still progress.
Perfect, thank you. And then the next one is, have you got any tips for career progression in a small company where perhaps there's not lots of opportunities for promotion, or perhaps maybe you can't speak to your manager about it? I guess maybe this sort of mentoring is where that might come into that, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I get that, sometimes in these SMEs, there isn't anywhere to go. So I still am a big believer in that communication piece, because it's important that you are certain that there's nowhere to go, because sometimes there's opportunities you haven't thought of, and there's things that they might surprise you with. I mean, for example, again, using me, we're a really small company. There's 7 of us in HSE recruitment, and I went to my then director at the time when I was looking at getting into director roles and things like this, and I suggested something that I would like to do that wasn't something that existed. It wasn't a position that existed. And we were able to create one because we could see the value in it. So I'm still a huge believer in that communication. But sometimes the ceiling is the ceiling. And that's why it's important to make sure because if you know that, then, okay, you think, right, well, I wanted to be there in 2 years, 3 years. I know that's not going to be here. So why don't I start doing some more networking? Why don't I work with a mentor now? So that in 2 or 3 years, when I do want to get into that position, I'll have some opportunities to go elsewhere. But yeah, it's an interesting question. It is a tough one.
It is. Next one is, in terms of global opportunities, what is the best way of pursuing these?
That's a very interesting question as well. So I'm presuming this is someone who potentially wants to move internationally. Again, you've just got to reach out to that network and speak to people. So speak to headhunters that specialize in roles in the country that you want to go to. Express an interest. Make sure you know if you're eligible. So look at the visa requirements and things like that. And a good one is to look at big companies, big global companies, because then there's opportunity for movement within that company as well. But yeah, I think you need to have those conversations with specialists, people that work in the countries that you want to work in, because they'll be able to give you really, really specific advice then on how to get across. We find a lot of people want to move to the UK and want to get roles over here, and they can sometimes struggle because there's a lot of good safety people in the UK. So in that instance, what's really important is that you've got that niche or that specialism or something that makes you stand out, because otherwise you're in a very, very large pool of people. So you've got to make sure there's that something that they need you for. So it may be, over here we're struggling with fire safety professionals, we don't have enough of them, or we struggle with occupational health people, we don't have enough of them. So anything like that, if you've got that sort of niche specialism, that's going to really, really help you move internationally as well.
Thank you. And then the last question, unless anybody else has any more. I've worked independently for 20 plus years and looking to take on additional contract work. Is it worth reaching out to organisations such as your own to get my name on your database?
100% it is. Yeah, absolutely. So before I became a director and started doing all this brand stuff, that was my bread and butter. I did all of our contract and interim recruitment. So we do a lot of it, and I've always got a special place in my heart for it. So yeah, absolutely. You want, again, to be known, because what will happen, for example, is, I had a client call me last week that needed someone immediately for a project. They didn't have time to do a search. They didn't have time to get an advert out there. But because they called me, I've got my Rolodex of people that I've known for 15 years, and I was able to call a couple of people, send them straight across, and they've got someone starting next week. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to do it, is make sure you're in touch with the right people.